Hi, welcome back to the show. I'm Alexander Dartarian.
I'm Trey.
And today we're going to do part 2 of The Zombie Hunter, Bryan Patrick Miller. If you missed the first episode, go back and listen to that. That is all about the alleged victims of Bryan Patrick Miller. We go into great detail about who they were and the details of their death. And this episode, we're going to go through Bryan Patrick Miller and his early life, and also the trial and verdict of 2 of the murders that he is allegedly a part of.
Yeah, those the 2 that he's in court for is what they're charging him for.
Yes, Angela Brasso and Melanie Bernays. I'm sorry, Melanie Bernays. So, Bryan Patrick Miller was born in 1972. Bryan had a few different things he was called. One of them is the Arizona Zombie Hunter. He had dressed up as a zombie hunter, complete with his own converted police car that had splattered with fake blood. He was well liked in his community. The children around Halloween loved seeing him in his zombie hunting outfit with his bloody police car and the zombie that was detained in the back of his car. He was friendly with the local police. Also, he took lots of photos with them. The other title he has is far less friendly. That is the Phoenix Canal Killer. He is currently incarcerated, but his crime time span goes from 1989 to 2002. He has 2 victims that we know for sure he can be attached to. He has been charged for, and he is in court for as well. Those 2 victims are Angela Brasso and Melanie Bernays. He's suspected in the case of the missing girl Brandy Myers, and also possibly connected to another murder case, Shannon Amok. Like we said, we covered those last episode, so go ahead and back and listen to those because they're awesome. January 2015. He was arrested after detectives used some creativity in obtaining his DNA sample in the house he shared with his teenage daughter. Investigators were searching avidly before he was detained. Police said that there was no DNA at the time of the killings, but in 1999, the PPD crime lab was able to identify suspect DNA from evidence taken at the original crimes. Their research also determined this is the same suspect that was connected to both canal murders. The FBI database came up with no matches, so the trail they were on had fallen cold once more. In 2013, investigators said they took the canal murders to a society of experts on the East Coast. In this group expertise helped cold case investigators zero in on Bryan Miller. Of course, police will not divulge how they obtained the DNA from Miller.
I wouldn't either.
Which kind of makes me think, did they obtain it illegally? Because I imagine usually they go through your trash.
They have to tell, for it to be,
they don't
allowed in court.
They don't need a warrant to get your DNA. If they physically take it from you, then they need a warrant. But say that you drink a coffee cup at a local restaurant and you throw it away, someone can go in there and grab it. They got your DNA. That's legal. Or if you drink beer and you take your garbage can to the end of the road where it's public property, they can get it from that as well. When they were searching his house, they thought there was a slight chance they might find the bicycles from Angela and Melanie, as they were not found on either crime scene, as well as the possible other things from the girls that he had allegedly had murdered. They also did confirm that shortly after the 1992 killings, he had left Phoenix. What had helped the investigators point to him as a suspect was actually his juvenile record. Remember the murders, or not the murder? I'm sorry, the stabbing.
The stabbing, yeah.
Of the 1989 stabbing.
I think she testifies.
Yeah, her name was Celeste Bentley, and she survived that attack. But surprisingly, he had no known criminal history as an adult. It is worth noting he was charged and ultimately acquitted in 2002 for stabbing a woman in Washington, claiming she had tried to rob him.
She tried to rob him?
Yes, and he stabbed her in self-defense.
Well, apparently he was believable.
It is also important to note that he is going to be charged with the disappearance of Brandy Myers, or the possibility that he may have been involved and murdered Shannon Amott. But again, they have not gathered enough evidence to this point to charge him for those.
Yeah, they wanted to, though.
So let's talk about the court case. It literally just started in
October.
Yeah, October of last year. So it's this is a relatively newer true crime story. January 2022, the judge had ruled Miller was mentally fit for trial. An expert working with the Miller defense team couldn't rule out the possibility that he was faking a mental disorder, the judge wrote. Even though he is competent, she had not ruled on the request by prosecutors to prohibit Miller from claiming at the trial that he was insane at the time of the crimes were committed. A prosecutor had characterized Miller's insanity defense bid as a delay tactic, pointing out that Miller's lawyers did not bring up such a defense until 6 years after the case was filed. Like I said, COVID slowed down.
Think about it. They're like, oh, wait.
Yeah, well, wait, he was insane.
He was not sane, obviously.
What kind of man dresses up as a zombie hunter? But like I said, COVID really slowed this trial down a lot. In the court filing in September, Miller's attorneys, of course, denied they were trying to delay their client's trial, and that another expert working with the defense will offer an opinion. So that's a really clever use of that word.
Well, it's like one side has one, you're going to find people who fit the prosecution or the defense, right? Mm-hmm. So the defense isn't going to go find someone that's like, oh yeah, you're right, he's insane.
So what they're trying to say is the experts trying to say that Miller has dissociative amnesia, which is a mental disorder in which a person cannot remember traumatic events. So say like a mother in postpartum killing her children and then not remembering it. Like that traumatic event, because of the mental disorder, made her forget that she murdered her own children.
I imagine people actually go through something like that, but it also is like the perfect yeah. It's like the perfect but you'd have to be able to prove it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just it's a cop out.
It is.
It really is. Like, oh, I don't remember doing any of that because
I think it is definitely in his case.
It reminds me of when you catch a child doing something they're not supposed to, or something's broken or something's spilled, and you go to your child and be like, "Oh, did you do this?" Or "I don't know," or "I don't remember if I did it." It's like if you don't remember you did it, then you can't get in trouble for it.
You can't get in trouble for it.
So it's also important to note that in an eval conducted by a defense expert, Miller had denied having amnesia and had appeared annoyed by the suggestion of him having a dissociative amnesia. That expert conceded Miller might have been faking amnesia. There's ways to figure it out, of course. The psychiatrists and psychologists, they know when you're faking a mental disorder. Sometimes, especially with multiple personality disorders, as we'll talk about later in the series and stuff, that there's people out there who faked having multiple personality disorders, and they've literally, psychiatrists are so pumped about getting that because that's a huge paper for them. So they're like, oh, yeah, you do. And then they start playing into it a little bit more, which makes it more real for them.
And, some of them aren't mentally stable, obviously.
Yeah.
So they're open to suggestion.
Yes. And, if you're smart enough as a killer, you can take that and run with it.
Well, I don't know if he's smart enough.
No. Miller has denied, of course, any involvement in the killings.
Obviously.
But had acknowledged he lived in the vicinity at the time. That's easily proven.
Well, not only that, but maybe his lawyers should not let him talk so much.
I know.
He's like getting defensive over amnesia. I mean, how can he not tell what they're trying to do?
Well, for one, if you're in trouble, whether you're innocent, especially if you're innocent or not, always ask for a lawyer. That's your right. There's a reason that's a right. Be quiet, shut up, don't say nothing. Wait for your lawyer. That's what you pay the lawyer for.
Unless you're a murderer, you can talk all you want.
Yeah. He also added that he used to ride his bike on the bike paths in the area.
See? He just keeps on doing it, keeps on talking.
Miller has also maintained he is innocent and pleaded not guilty to charges of murder, kidnapping, and attempted sexual assault. So he has went from blowing up his case, basically, I didn't have dissociative amnesia.
Yeah, I didn't have that.
Yeah, I don't have that. And it got really...
I'm offended that you think that.
And then, I lived over there. I rode my bikes right where they were murdered.
Yeah, I was right there all the time.
If he's not the murderer, he's really giving the cops oh, okay, keep talking. He's just going to talk himself into a hole. October 3rd, 2022. The bench trial was scheduled to begin. Prosecutors said the state is seeking the death penalty if Miller is convicted. He waived his right to a jury trial, so a Maricopa County Superior Court judge will have the sole decision in making up Miller's fate. He had been arrested in January 2015 due to DNA evidence linked with the Canal murders. So, why do you think that he decided to forgo the jury and just have a judge?
It's easier to convince one person than 12?
12 peers, yeah. That, and a lot of people have said lately, especially since we're a social media society now, that people are guilty before they even get a chance to defend themselves in court. Because in court, when you're charged for murder, it is not up to you to prove that you're innocent. You already have the illusion of innocence. It's up to the prosecutor to prove that you're guilty. It's up to them to show the burden of proof. But with social media, most of the jurors know what the crime is before they even go in there, especially if it's big. You're not going to find a jury that nowadays that's not on social media.
Yeah, but you also have to a bench trial for a murder, is kind of weird.
It is. There in England, I don't think they have. You can England, there's a lot of times it's the judge that decides your fate, I think, and not a jury. There's different ways. I guess they have a choice as well. You can, I guess, in Arizona, you can either go against one judge or 11 or 12 of your peers. October 4th, 2022, Joseph Krakowicki, who was the boyfriend of Angela Brasso, takes the stand. He testifies in court and describes the last time he had seen her before her headless body was found. Defense had no questions for Krakowicki.
I imagine.
Yeah, that's a tough ask. Detective Mike Malache testified to the details of the graphic murder scene, which we talked about in the first episode. Prosecutors had exhibits like clothing Angela was wearing and when she was murdered. Defense had said they will show defendant Miller is not guilty by reason of insanity.
Which isn't going to work.
They say Miller suffers from autism spectrum disorder and complex dissociative disorders. While prosecutors maintain the murders of Angela and Melanie were planned and calculated. So not only is not only did they try to do this dissociative amnesia, they're saying he's autistic or he's on the spectrum of autism.
Yep.
Which, if they were still around, his diagnosis would probably be Asperger's. But I don't like that. I don't like that they're using those mental disorders for violence, because the majority of mental disordered patients are nonviolent. Like, having mental disorders does not inherently make you a violent person. Well, it's quite the opposite. Usually it makes you docile.
They're saying, that that he wasn't in charge of himself. They're using them as outs.
Yeah.
They're not saying, hey, because he might be on the spectrum, he's violent. They're saying because he's on the spectrum, he didn't know what he was doing.
Yeah. And I think that he knew what he was doing. I think he knew right from wrong, because even autistic, if you're on the spectrum, they know right from wrong. They know, hey, that hurts someone, don't do that.
Oh, it depends on how severe.
Yeah. October 5th, 2022, Elaine Bernass testified in court describing the last time she had seen her daughter before her body was found, which is a very difficult thing to do. I mean, even if it's 20 years later.
It's your child.
Yeah. October 10th, 2022, a pathologist talked about an autopsy results for Melanie, and the detectives also took to the stand to testify about surveillance on Miller, obtaining his DNA, and the search of Miller's home.
Looking for the bikes that weren't there.
Yep. October 11th, 2022, this date focused on the autopsies of both Angela and Melanie. The doctor who examined the autopsies detailed the stab wounds as well as the damage caused by those wounds. Both had major damage to their aorta, the main artery that carries blood from the heart to the rest of the body. So he stabbed so deep that he severed the aorta, making their deaths happen. If that was the first strike he did, they would not have lived through much more of the stabbing. So I don't know if that's a blessing.
Probably not dying would have been.
I know it would have been more of a blessing, but that you die quickly instead of being tortured is, I guess, a blessing too. October 31st, 2022. Some of the testimonies on this date focused on the evidence seized during the search conducted in 2015 when Miller was arrested. Also, Phoenix Police digital forensic scientists and a Phoenix crime lab serologist testified on the DNA that was discovered. In 2015, search warrant on the search warrant, PPD detective David Hadid, digital forensic scientist, looked at Miller's phone and laptop. Yeah. So I'm thinking, since he's gonna have some other creepy stuff.
He might.
Yeah, because he hasn't killed in how long that we know of?
30-ish years.
Yeah, so he had something to keep him happy. November 3rd, 2022, trial is scheduled to resume around 10:30. November 14th, the trial is scheduled to resume November 14th. So they kept on pushing it back. They kept on postponing it to December 15th, 2022. Trial proceedings on this date involved a deep dive into Miller's mind. One clinical psychologist talked about allegedly unspeakable abuse by Miller's now deceased mother.
Oh, now they're blaming.
So a long time. So basically, with serial killers, that's a common thread: abusive mothers and absentee fathers. So now we're getting more into the why.
The possible
why he became who he became.
If it can even be believed.
Yeah.
He's using as many tactics as he can at this point.
So this is a quote. I don't recall if it was scissors or a knife that time. They started trying to attack him, saying she was going to cut off his penis, said Dr. Bethany Brand. So she was attacking him, trying to cut off his penis, is one of the abuse that he allegedly said, or that he says that his mother allegedly did to him as a child, which that would cause a lot of trauma if that was the case. Defense claim Miller suffers from a number of mental health conditions: PTSD, a dissociative disorder, amnesia, and DID, dissociative identity disorder.
Oh, they threw that one in there too.
Yep. They claim as a child Miller would imagine being an animal when times got tough. I don't think that would be a dissociative disorder. I thought that would be a dissociative identity disorder is just a split personality, isn't it?
I don't know.
I believe that's what it's referred to now, is the multiple personality disorder. It's just called dissociative identity disorder. But I'm guessing they think that his second identity is an animal.
I have no idea.
Which, I mean, has happened. I've seen a dissociative identity disorder patient turn into a dragon.
Like physically?
His face contorted, and he started making dragon sounds, like roars and stuff.
We don't even know what dragon sounded like. If they were even real.
I know, but I'm just saying, like, there's people that, I don't know. It was in a documentary. I've seen it. He refers to a part of himself as squirreling himself away into a ball, playing dead like an armadillo, Miller's lawyer said.
He's using all sorts of different animals.
Nope. That's literally part of the language, the dissociation literature, because some small mammals and other animals and children can literally pretend to play dead. It's part of the dissociative response. So he's basically taking what he's saying right out of the book. Like, this is the book that tells him how to fake it, almost. It's textbook dissociative identity disorder is what he's trying to say. It's because he feels like an animal. Trial proceedings were held up by constant objections. This is the last day for the proceedings before 2022 Christmas break. January 9th, 2023, the state was crucial for it could make or break his insanity plea. If he goes to prison or is put to death. Defense is trying to prove Miller is not guilty by reason of insanity. DNA was found on the girls that belonged to him. So rather than try to deny that he did it, his team is going for why he was insane at the time. It didn't know what he was doing wrong. So he's saying he committed these murders. He said, yes, I killed these women. But I was insane at the time, so I didn't know what I was doing was right or wrong.
Yep.
Dr. Bethany Brand said Miller suffered from dissociative amnesia, which he had previously denied and even gotten annoyed by it, just the complete mention of it. But do you think that goes along with his mental disorders? Because if you're crazy or if you're insane, you don't admit you're insane. You don't think you're insane. You think you're the most sane person. So someone saying, hey, you're insane.
She wasn't even saying that he was insane. She was saying that he had amnesia.
Yeah, I know. But if you don't feel like you had that, though.
The easiest thing to be like, oh, yeah, I have that.
Not if you're in the right mind. Not if you have mental disorders.
If he even has mental disorders, besides, whatever mental disorder causes what he's done to these women.
Yeah. The state specifically asked you, it is your opinion that somebody with dissociative amnesia could cause someone to commit a murder. Do you recall that question? Defense attorney asked Dr. Brand. Yes, she replied. What was your answer to that question? Defense asked. Something like it could be related but not casual, Dr. Brand said. There could be a part of them, a self state, that has very violent, revengeful feelings, fantasies, and wishes, and another part not know about it. And so in that case, it could contribute, but in other cases, there's plenty of dissociative amnesic patients out there that don't commit murders. Dr. Brand also brought up the fact that Miller did not want to have dissociative disorder and didn't seem aware of his symptoms. Okay. I don't want to have that, so I'm not aware of any symptoms.
Well, I mean, if you don't look into something, you're not going to know that you have it anyway.
I guess, but you're going to know something's off, like missing time. There's a lot of dissociative identity disorder patients have missing time.
He just turns into a squirrel.
Yeah, squirrel, and pretends. I guess it's a deadly squirrel, I guess. He just became very frustrated every time I kept pushing and playing out things like your semen was found on these women. You know, he became incredibly frustrated with me pushing this. He didn't become hostile. He didn't become irate, but he was very frustrated, she said. Dr. Brand recalls that Miller had never confessed to her that he had done these murders. I think the most important thing is he doesn't remember these murders. To not remember doing something is egregious as murder. So egregious as murder, that's incredibly dysfunctional. So, not remembering that you've murdered somebody is like your brain's broken, basically. But I think he remembers it quite well.
Yeah, so he remembers it just fine.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's like he's getting irritated and he wasn't getting violent with me, like that points out something.
So with the mental, so that testimony was big for Miller.
I mean, wasn't she she was on his side?
She was on his side, yes.
And
but that does, so with experts, let's go through the experts' cases of things. All right, so we're all familiar with the Amber Heard Johnny Depp case that was televised. It was huge. So they both had psychiatrists on their side look into the other. All right, so an expert on the stand cannot give an unbiased opinion. They have to tell the truth regardless. They cannot swing it one way or the other. Now, the defense lawyer will ask them, not leading questions, but they'll ask them questions that will make their client look favorable. And then the prosecutor will cross examine or cross talk or ask them questions and cross examination, and they'll ask questions that will make that client not so favorable. Look so favorable. So the expert can only give their expert opinion. They can't be like, oh, well, this is why he did it, and I know for a fact he has. They're like, oh, it is my opinion that he has dissociative identity disorder, and he didn't know what he was doing at the time, and all that stuff. But she cannot be like, oh, well, they paid me to say this.
Well,
because they do have to pay experts.
She's the one that's volunteering information that wasn't even in the question.
Yeah, and she's just trying to give the judge, because these judges don't know what the hell they're talking about. And they use a lot of buzzwords, too. They're like, oh, well, he feared for his life. Or they'll say a lot of stuff that that sticks in your mind a little more. But a verdict has been reached. I think the trial went on for 4 months. From October to April.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so from October to April. And so what was the verdict?
Well, since there's no jury,
mm-hmm.
it's just the judge.
Yeah.
She went and and like you said, they were looking at whether he was insane at the time, if he didn't know what he was doing or whatever. But when she came back out, and the sentencing itself hasn't happened yet.
Okay.
But the verdict is that he's been found guilty on all 6 counts.
So he has been found guilty. He may be facing the death penalty. We do not know for sure whether the judge is going to take pity on him. They still have to do the victim impact statements at sentencing. So when a murderer commits a crime, or it gets charged and convicted of murders, like Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy BTK, and Jeffrey Dahmer. They all have to sit at sentencing for the family members to give victim impact statements. So you'll see that. I don't know if they'll televise it or not. Was this trial televised in any way? You don't know?
No, okay. I haven't paid any attention.
Some of them aren't. Sometimes some judges don't allow it. But I don't know if this particular judge did or not. It wasn't a jury trial, so I doubt it. But the victim impact statements are the most important part of a trial after the killer has been convicted of the crime. They get to go up there and tell them exactly how their actions affected them and pretty much what they think of them. And he has to sit there, no matter how long it takes, for them all to speak.
That seems a bit...
And that's before sentencing. That's before the judge makes up her mind.
Well, Richard Parker, Miller's attorney, he has 26 witnesses that he wants to bring up, to add to why he should be spared.
Yes.
And he's like...
character witnesses, yeah.
Yeah, and he says that a loss of another life was unnecessary for justice to be served.
Okay.
I don't think that's his place to say much of anything. He's the defense lawyer, so...
Well, but he doesn't... That doesn't make him a bad person.
I didn't say it makes him a bad person.
He's just doing his job.
It's just an insensitive thing to say because it's not... Of course, he doesn't think so. That's his job, for one.
Yeah.
And it's not his family that was killed by this maniac.
But it's also... What right is it of the state to say that they have the right to kill you?
It's not the state, it's just the judge. So.
Well, yeah, but the state carries out the murder.
Well, I hope he has very good 26 witnesses then.
Yeah. That's also in his, I don't know if they'll use all 26 witnesses. They may, but they'll go up there and give a good character witness, and that the judge will take that in consideration along with the victim impact statements. But he is convicted. He will. I think they get certain. If he is sentenced to death, they get 4 appeals. I think 4 appeal processes. And then it might be different in Arizona, but he'll automatically appeal it. And hopefully, I'm hoping maybe if he does get sentenced to death, and if he did in fact kill Shannon Amok and Brandy Myers, that he will confess to those, maybe to get off of death row if he doesn't want to be on death row.
Well, they'll,
hopefully they'll make a deal.
Talk about anything to not die.
Yeah. And just to give them closure, I know that Melanie and Angela's family now have some sort of semblance of closure now that he has been convicted.
Something that I just found out is that you remember the turquoise jumpsuit thingy?
Yes.
That
she was wearing.
Yeah.
That wasn't part of her clothing, yeah.
Yeah.
That Melanie was wearing.
A friend from work testified because he recognized it right away.
Yeah.
And his name was Randy McGlade.
Okay.
And he talked to this guy from work.
Yeah.
Bryan Miller.
Uh-huh.
And he had seen the bodysuit, that exact bodysuit, in Miller's collection of crap. So he testified and was like, yeah, no, I know for a fact that he had it.
Where do you think Melanie was going? Because she stayed home from school sick, and then she left as soon as her mother left, or some in between the 2 hours.
I don't know. She could have been going anywhere. She could have just not felt good, wanted to get some air, and went out to ride the bike.
Yeah. I'm wondering if she was wearing that leotard or something, because maybe Bryan Patrick Miller was like grooming her or something, or catfishing her, something like that. I don't know. I just don't know why he would have her put that on.
might not have been voluntary or while she was alive.
Yeah, it's really hard to arrest someone when they're unconscious or dead.
It's
all dead weight. But yeah, I mean, I think that he deserves the death penalty. I really wish that he would confess to the Shannon Amok and Brandy Myers murder so that the other families have closure. And I'm wondering if he does have more bodies on him, if he's killed more, or if he's suspected of more murders.
I guess not right now.
I mean, he obviously did try.
Well, he stayed in minus when he moved the first time. He stayed in the Phoenix area.
Yeah.
So
for a long time. So I mean, he is convicted now of 2 murders, 2 sexual assaults,
no.
and attempted.
The 6 counts was excuse me. I know that one was for sexual assault, one was for attempted sexual assault, 1 or 2 counts of kidnapping, I believe.
2 counts of kidnapping and 2 counts of murder.
First degree murder.
Yeah.
Kidnapping, first degree murder, attempted sexual assault, and then sexual assault. So I guess they were able to prove that he sexually assaulted one of them.
Yeah, that's how they found the DNA on him.
Yeah, well,
So, I mean, I guess he did sexually assault at least one of them, if not both of them. Definitely a sick individual who deserves to pay for his crimes.
He didn't even react when the verdict was given.
He's a psychopath.
He kept his eyes down and he didn't even react.
And looking at his picture, I mean, is one of those like, yeah, he was something. Either he was, a murderer or just a sicko. He just had that look. I guess it's because we know who he is and we know what he did, and then we can look at it. But I don't know, not knowing what he did and everything, and just looking at him, you could just tell that there was something wrong. But that concludes the zombie hunter, Bryan Patrick Miller. We talked about his victims and his trial and everything.
Except his sentencing.
Yeah, except for his sentencing. We don't know for sure yet. We might give a little update in a later episode. And it's a relatively new case, really.
Considering how far back that he committed the crimes and when he was caught itself.
Yeah.
It took forever for the trial to even start. And plus, COVID did slow down a lot of things.
Yeah. And just the fact that, we'll probably know a lot more in a year or two about his childhood. People go in there and he'll be interviewed. These psychopaths, these murderers, they just love to talk.
They also don't tell the truth very often.
Yeah, they don't at all. We don't know exactly. Like, most of the time we find out about these serial killers, it's from the mouth of the serial killers. We don't know what's true and what's not true about being abused and everything. So, again, it could be something he's made up completely.
Well, as far as I know, I think the only person that admitted 100% to murdering people was Jeffrey Dahmer. He 100%, he didn't even, from the start, he was like, yeah, no, that was me.
Ed Kemper as well.
Ed Kemper, yeah.
Ed Kemper as well. Just right out, didn't try to hide anything. This was Ed Kemper has actually called the police on himself and said, hey, I'm the co-ed killer, and they didn't believe him. They hung up on him.
Yeah.
And he called several times. So, next episode is going to be Urban Legends Ohio. Yep, and Dom will be back for that. So, super excited about that. Go ahead and follow that link below to follow all of our social medias, and we do have Patreon. If you subscribe to just $1, you get all the extra bonus content that we have on there. And also go look at the store. There's a lot of cool T-shirts and everything out there.
Yep, nice T-shirts.
Yep. So we'll see you next weekend for Urban Legends Ohio. Thank you.